Fufu, whether you're somebody who pulled for her or is pulling for her because you have Yishuan and want to make her stronger, or you intend on investing into Monato, or maybe even Yidhara because you like Rupture, apparently, unless you're those select few who just pulled because you got Lucia because she's hot. Or maybe you're like me and all the characters you like are stunners because stunners are hot and Fufu is hot. First and foremost, on ground rule, Fufu does not need her signature. It gives you some good buffs, don't get me wrong, but among all the other characters in the game, I really think Fufu's signature is only really beneficial for the extra attack, and you have a variety of options for that. Secondarily, even though Fufu, yes, is technically speaking meant for Rupture characters like Yishuan, she's not strictly bound. None of the buffs she specifically gives are tied solely to Rupture characters. Fufu only wants an attacker or a Rupture character, meaning that technically speaking, the only one she doesn't work with is Anomaly. This means that if you want to use her with Anby, you can, because Fufu does do Aftershock. If it's Orphe, if it's Seed, it doesn't matter. Now, I know the ass is mesmerizing, and she is very cute, and this is the best idol in the game. I want to mention a few things. First and foremost, even a team like this, where it's Yishuan, Alice, and Fufu, does technically work, because Yishuan satisfies the Rupture character requirement. So in this instance, she gives a buff. This is 30% crit damage, just off base. This applies to the entire team. This means that once we switch to Alice, or even Anby, and we use her attack and Fufu auto attacks, we get a buff. This buff specifically enhances the crit damage all the way up to 75%. As you see here, it's 45% just from her buff, a chain attack damage boost, and ultimate damage boost. Bluntly speaking, every other half of these buffs affects even Anomaly characters. The only one who's not benefiting from this is Alice, strictly off the crit damage. This is because she's not Miyabi. Now, if you're somebody like me and you use somebody like Anby and you're interested in Fufu, please keep in mind this. Her Aftershocks do contribute to Anby's buff count. As you see here, it builds up marks. And whilst these marks aren't extremely fast, they do apply. And generally speaking, I'd recommend only pulling Fufu outside of Rupture teams for her buffing capabilities, and maybe a Anby if you don't like Trigger, which is what I do. Secondarily, she extends your decibel meter, which essentially means you don't have to ult as often and you can have a little bit more leeway. Let's be real here. You pulled because this ass is undeniably flat. And even though, in my opinion, she doesn't really have good cinema art, at least compare it to some of the other characters, like Qingyi as an example, especially Alice, she's still extremely good. Now, for general pieces, most of you will be going with attack, attack, and attack. This is because you're trying to maximize her buff. You can go with crit rate like I did in the event that you either A, have her signature, or B, have enough attack substat to actively hit her cap. Now, I don't recommend you max out the attack. 3300, 3400, that's fine. Generally, you want to be around that range. This is because anything above 2800 basically increases that crit damage buff to a max of 30%. You don't really need to hit that max cap. You're losing a little bit, but it's not worth it, because for the vast majority of players, I'd recommend you get as much attack as you can and then hit the minimum 50% crit rate cap just so you can maximize the buff of King of the Summit, because that's what you're using her. Realistically speaking, every stunner should be using that. You don't have to max out any of these. I did it because I want to smash. Like, what do you expect from it? And if you're somebody who likes her enough to invest into her future, like I will be doing, E1 basically makes it so that you have a little bit more leeway when it comes to getting crit substats or crit rate main stat. It increases her damage, but I want to be clear, the vast majority of her additional cinemas increase her personal damage. E2 changes that from what is essentially a 50% crit rate buff, because you're taking the 20% here and the 30% here, and pushes that up to 72. This also alleviates her requirement on continuously using her EX special skill to continuously gain her follow. Everything beyond this, it's personal damage. Her crit damage increases by 35%. And then C6, her damage increases. Now, I will say, she doesn't do bad damage, but keeping in mind, Fufu is a glorified buffer. She's focused less on stunning and more on buffing your characters. This is because even though she's geared towards Rupture and technically speaking attacker characters, Ruptures don't really care as much about the character being stunned or the enemy being stunned. Now, if you're using somebody like Monato, I can understand you going for Fufu, because Fufu does give a little more buffs and Monato is a 4-star. Ignore my Yishuan build. I'm not gonna lie, she's not my favorite character. She's invested to some degree, but we don't talk about what happened with Miao. Amongst all the stunners, Fufu is equivocal to Trigger in that they both take minimal field time compared to Koleda, compared to Qingyi, compared to Lighter, who I don't have. Fufu's focused more on buffing. Trigger has a little bit more personal damage and def reduction. Compared to somebody like Qingyi, less, I suppose, team-wide buffing effects in her cons. Qingyi reduces defense. Qingyi increases the daze damage she does, and subsequently the stun damage multiplier. Qingyi does a bit more for the team. Fufu does a bit more for your buffing capabilities and herself. That's really the general difference. Both are hot. Pull them. What are you here for? You weren't here for a guide. You were here because you like the character. You want to smash the character. Let's be real here. You don't see this walking animation and say, man, you know, I really want to build this character properly. No, she's been absent from the story since her release. You want to smash her, and that's fine. Go ahead. I recommend you do it. She's cute. Subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Get the fuck out of my shot.